Could you open up to the book of Romans, chapter 1? We're going to look today at verses 8 through 13. Today I'm going to attempt the impossible in our study in Romans. And I'm serious. This is a passage that is going to challenge me to try to persuade you to start caring for other people. Maybe the most difficult endeavor is to get us to change who we are. And when I mean love, I'm going to talk today about cultivating mature kind of love. Not the Facebook kind of love, where you virtue signal. And I'm talking about where you get involved in messy, dirty, loving each other deeply from the heart, as 2 Peter 1:22 says. That kind of love is rare. And so I'm going to try to compel you to cultivate this kind of love. And it may be the most ambitious goal a preacher could ever try to accomplish, because it's hard to get people to change, especially from our nature. Our natural nature is to run away from this world and hide and just be left alone. Just leave me alone. It's in our gut. We're designed to be alone almost in our flesh. And what this message is, it's just the opposite. Start caring about other people. And I've told you from the pulpit often, one of my biggest dreams, if I could have a dream, one of my biggest dreams is to buy one of those tiny little houses that you can hook up to your car, go out in the woods, get a propane tank, and live there for the next 25 years reading books, not talking to anybody. That's one of my dreams. That's somebody over here said, who said amen? Somebody said amen. Oh, it's Wendy, of course. Wendy, it's too late. Did you see your kids lately? You're not going to get away. But the Spirit of God won't let me do that. My wife won't let me do that. The demands of my job won't let me do that. My phone, being a pastor of a large church, won't let me do that. Because if you haven't noticed, this world is on fire. This world is hurting. And because of that, firemen are always needed, especially spiritual firemen. So today we're going to look at Romans 8:13. And before we read it, we are continuing to follow Paul on this incredible journey called the book of Romans. But this month really is an introductory month. This is going to be the metaphor we use. If you look at this metaphor right here, this is an arbor inviting you into a garden. Last week, if you remember, we met the hero of the story. His name is Jesus Christ. And we learned that he is the Son of God and the Son of Man, and there's nobody like him. Today, we're going to just kind of peer over the arbor and look inside, and we're going to see that this garden that we're going to start talking about is in bad shape. And we are going to be invited by Paul to go in and start pulling out weeds, ripping out dead roots and dead stumps, and planting real seeds that cause a life to flourish. And so the whole theme of Romans is this is a life that goes from dead to alive, and in not just alive, but in full bloom. This is the kind of life God wanted you to live. That's what Romans is all about. But to do that, we need to care about it. We need to care about people. And that's what Romans 8 through 13 is about, 1:8 through 13. So if you can follow along with me, let's begin in verse 8. Paul writes, first, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is being reported all over the world. God, whom I serve in my spirit in preaching the gospel of his Son, is my witness how constantly I remember you in my prayers at all times. And I pray that now at last, by God's will, the way may be open for me to come to you. I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I planned many times to come to you, but have been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had among the other Gentiles. Some people would call what I just read the flyover section of Romans. Not many people read this. If you do commentary readings, there's very little ink spilled by commentators on this section. In a way, this is kind of the stuff you read to get by so we can get into the good stuff. Because really, starting next week, starting with verse 14, Romans gets incredible. So people like to pass this by. And they like to just say, yeah, okay, it's introductory matters. He's just writing to the church saying, you know what, I pray for you. I can't wait to see you. Now let's get to the good stuff. But let's hold off for a second. We need to stop on what we read. Because instead of just reading the words exegetically, that means, what is he trying to say? We need to see Paul's life and compare it to ours, because from 21st century ears, what he is saying does not compute. I once heard, if you want to be a good Bible reader, act like you've never read it before. Go into it like an agnostic, meaning, I need to know, is this true? And he goes, when you read the Bible like that, it will start piercing you. Like, what? And what Paul is saying in here is overwhelming. Because what he's doing is financially, emotionally, physically crazy. His choices are crazy. They're choices that, if I made these same choices at my age, you would think I'm ruining my life. Let me give you an idea what I mean by reading through with 21st century lenses. Go to the book of Mark. This will make sense of what I mean about how to approach the Bible. Go to the book of Mark, and I want you to go to chapter 1. I'm just going to read one day in the life of Jesus. Now, you got to realize what I'm going to read for you. Jesus at this time was at the age of 30. He was a single man. He was very talented, to say the least. People would gather just to hear him. He was at the height of his physical prowess. I'll bet you he was attractive, because he was the perfect man. And he was very talented in the sense that he could take bread and feed everybody in a room. Like, that could really make some good money for you. Like, Jesus had it all. So I asked the question, how did Jesus, as a single man, spend Friday night and early Saturday morning? A regular Saturday. Because I know how a normal 30-year-old man that was single, was good looking, was in good shape, would spend their average Saturday. An average 30-year-old single man would probably go to the gym, get a big breakfast somewhere, maybe go through the drive-thru at Starbucks and get a Frappuccino, call his buddies, watch a couple games on ESPN, because he got all day Saturday, play a few rounds of Fortnite with his other friends online, rest a little bit, then get dressed, go clubbing, stay out all night, and then sleep in on Sunday. Because, man, that was a hard day on Saturday, and I'm exhausted. That's what an average 30-year-old, single, good-looking man would do in our country. That's what I would do. It's my day, right? It's mine. Okay, let's see what Jesus did. Let's start in verse 21. It says, they, meaning the disciples and Jesus, went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. So what does he do on his Saturday? He begins by teaching. So then you go to verse 29. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, so he goes to visit a sick old lady. And they immediately told Jesus about her, so he went to this sick old lady and took her hand and helped her up. The fever immediately left her, and she began to wait on them. Okay, so are they going to go out now and go clubbing? Oh, look what happens in verse 32. That evening, after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town sick, demon-possessed? Yeah. He's a single 30-year-old man. Why is he putting up with this? He doesn't need this. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. And very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went to a solitary place where he prayed. How many 30-year-old guys do that? No, man, because I'm free. I should be able to do what I want. Jesus gave his life to love others. And that's what Paul does. So if we go to Romans, he's going to show us what it looks like to be a man who maturely loves others. And the question for today is going to be this. What does mature love look like? How does it act? How does it respond? Now you got to realize at this time, he was probably 50 or 60. This was written 57 AD. He is a contemporary of Jesus, so when Jesus was 30, Paul was probably 30, so you figure he here was 50, 60 years old. And we are going to evaluate our own lives by his perspective. Do I live like this? And you're probably saying, well, that's not fair because he's an apostle. Yeah, but he says, imitate me as I imitate other people. So here's my quick disclaimer. Doing this study for me convicted me more than any other study of Romans I've ever done. Because normally Romans, it's fun to think on theology, and that's what Romans is about. We're going to get into it. This is not about theology. This is about, do you do what you believe? If you believe this, does it show up in your life, day to day, in your plans, in your future, in your finances? Does it? That's what this is about. Because this is how Paul really lived. And if Paul lived like this, shouldn't I? He says in 1 Corinthians 15, by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I that was working, but the grace of God that was with me. And guess what? That same grace is given to you. You don't need to be an apostle to live like this. And so the second question is, why do I call this kind of love mature? Because we know what infantile love looks like. Infantile love only loves those people and those things that make me feel good. Infantile love only loves those people and those things that make me feel good. That's called easy love. But Paul's love is mature, and it does three things. The first thing is this. Mature love goes on long, difficult journeys to be with those he loves. And by going means he initiates. He doesn't wait for others to call and say, I just am all alone here. He goes to see people that he loves. He initiates. It's up to him. So in this section, Paul talks about two long journeys that he takes. And you're like, I only saw one journey he wants to take. No, if you look closely, there's two. The first journey is verse 8. See if you can find it. Verse 8. Look at verse 8. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you because your faith is being reported all over the world. Do you see it? You see the journey? No. What journey are you talking about? Well, he's probably talking about the hardest journey for most of us because I've been in ministry for 25 years and I've seen very few people commit to this journey on a regular basis. What journey are you talking about? The journey up to heaven to pray on other people's behalf. Regularly, daily. That's a hard trip for people to make. He says, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you. Look at verse 9. God, whom I'm serving my spirit and preaching the gospel of the Son, is my witness how constantly I remember you in my prayers at all times. Oh, that's a hard journey to make. It's one of the toughest. Really, coming to church on Sunday is relatively easy because you get something. You get to sing and you get sermons. And you get to see people and shake hands, and that's great. During the rest of the week, most people have things to do. You should see how packed the high school gym gets to go watch basketball games. That's incredible. But Tuesday night prayer meeting, not many people show up. I'm not saying that out of guilt. I'm just saying that out of it's hard to get people to pray? Why? And my question is, why is it hard to pray for most people? And if you say, it's not hard for me, if you're a human being, you're like me, and I know it's hard for me, so I have a feeling it's hard for you. There's few people that I just say it comes easy. Why? I'm just going to be honest with you, because for me, it's boring. It bores me to tears. Part of my frustration is that I like to be stimulated, and Satan knows this. So he has a phone that has all kind of videos and funny shows. I can watch bloopers of The Office at any time. I can see cat videos. I can laugh, all day long. And why do I want to get up early when I can sleep an hour longer in bed to pray? I don't want to do that. And then an hour on Tuesday night, for me, sometimes, leaving on Tuesday night, it's like pulling teeth. Why is it so hard? Here's the reason why I think it's so hard. Not only do we like to be stimulated, but it's not cool. It's kind of uncool to pray. Cool people shouldn't be expected to pray. You've seen cool people, you know what I'm talking about. They get on their phone, they make plans on their phone, and then when they go to those plans that they make on their phone, they go to that and they start making plans for the next place that they can go. And the reason, because the more plans you have, the more kind of active and busy you are. And the more busy you are, the more you're important. So going to prayer night, it's kind of boring. You sit and pray. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of going to my grandparents' house in Perrysville, Ohio. We used to call it Peeville, and they lived in a little trailer home. I remember I have to go see my grandpa and grandma, and often spend like 3-4 hours with them, and I have to sit on their flower couches while they watch the Lawrence Welk show, and my grandpa snores in his Easy Boy chair. That's what prayer's kind of like. You know what I mean? Boring. You're probably saying, why are you downing prayer? Because I know you. This is a hard journey to take. But it says Paul made this journey up to heaven every day, probably 3 times a day, spending long time for everybody on his list. That's love. And this is going to get a little bit harder. I once heard people will only pray for those they care about. Have you ever prayed for the guy down the row from your pew? No, I don't even want to look at him. Paul, if he was part of our church, he'd be praying for all of you guys all the time. Why? Because he had mature love. So the first journey he took was to heaven, but he also wanted to take the physical journey to go see those he loved in the church face to face, because he knew it was very important to see people face to face. Look at verse 11. I long to see you. That's presence. I long to see you that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. Now, mind you, at this time, Paul's probably 57. Here's where he's at. This is the map. He is writing this book from Corinth. That's where Corinth is. Mediterranean Sea. And he's writing to the people in Rome. And he's telling them he is making plans to travel to see them, and it's 1,100 miles of rough roads. That's love. And it's convicting. And he wants to see them face to face. And this is hard for me, because what it convicts me of is I haven't seen my mom in a while. And you know why I don't want to go see my mom? Because I'm lazy. My wife gets on my case. When are you going to go see your mom? But aren't there people you probably need to go see? Probably, maybe even across the street or across town. But we don't like to, because we'd rather be comfortable. But mature love understands we were made to be present, to be with each other, not to just be safe. So I'd say mature love strives to go the distance to be with people. Love shows up. Love goes to extend moral support, emotional support, encouragement, empathy, sympathy. Look at verse 11 and 12 again. I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. Why? Verse 12. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. There's something that happens when I'm with somebody in the present. My wife has pushed me on this because she knows I'm German. And as I already told you, I just want to get away from people. But this job won't let me. It won't let me. I want to live in that tiny house. But I know I'm a pastor. I got to set an example, as Paul did, because I've found this truth that most people who aren't in ministry rarely go. So I got to set an example. If you ask people, yeah, but we're not gifted. I'm not gifted like a Chris Paone. That guy likes to talk. He'll go visit people. I'm not gifted like a Rhonda Vanderwest. She likes to talk too. She'll go talk to people. But if we're going to imitate Paul, as he wrote in his letters, we need to travel and go see people, even if it's across the street. And honestly, I think this is where COVID-19 played its most dastardly trick on us. It got us to believe and be convinced that Zoom and FaceTime is enough. It's not enough. It actually killed us to be away and not to be present. I remember the first year I was in ministry, first year as senior pastor here. I had to do a funeral for a lady who died, and her son wanted me to do her funeral because he was a regular attender and he's part of our golf league, our men's golf league. The man's mom, however, didn't go to her church. He lived pretty far away, but since he's a regular attender, he asked me to go, so it was a little tiny funeral chapel, and he went there, and truthfully, it was really badly attended, and not one golf member was at the funeral. So in the next deacons meeting, I remember I was young at the time, so I asked questions I don't ask anymore. So at the next deacons meeting, I asked the question. I said, "Why do we have a golf league?" Just ask the guys. And I was very naive. I shouldn't meddle, but I asked, "Why do we have a golf league here?" And they said, "Oh, the golf league's about fellowship." I said, "Well, what's fellowship?" When we can share lives with each other. I said, "If that's true, why didn't anybody show up at the funeral for this guy?" And nothing was said. I cringed and I said, "I'm just asking." I thought I was going to be fired. I probably still will be fired for it. That's funny. It's funny, this week my daughter got her car, and I'm thinking, wow, all my kids have their own car now. My wife and I got a car. So what we plan to do when we go to places, we're all going to take our own car to go visit. So it's perfect. If we go on a long trip to see my mom, we'll all take our own car. It'll be a great trip, won't it? Well, you're going to waste gas. Who cares? But we'll get to listen to our own radio station. Isn't that a silly illustration? Yes, but people are going to heaven like that. They just sit in their own houses and they don't travel with anybody anymore. We don't travel with anybody anymore. Why? Because I want to listen to my own station. Leave me alone. This is a hard one. That's mature love. Second thing about mature love is this. Mature love shares God-given gifts with others, even if it's risky, even if people don't take it well, even if they don't understand. I'm still going to share it with you. Look at verse 11. Paul says, I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. The spiritual gift Paul had was the ability to teach and preach. Look at verse 9. God, whom I serve in my spirit, in preaching the gospel. So his gift was preaching and teaching the gospel. That was his spiritual gift. It was his driving passion to proclaim Christ. He wanted to do this because he knew it was for other people's good. In fact, he says in Colossians 1:28 and 29, I proclaim him, admonishing and teaching everyone, so that we may present everyone fully mature in Christ. To this end, I strenuously contend with all the energy Christ works in me. So Paul believed that his gift of teaching and preaching was so important that he gave his all to do it. He really believed God gave him gifts that we're able to affect other people's lives. And He's given you gifts to do the same thing. I'm not sure people actually believe this, though. Most people sit back, let other people lead. I'm not that good. I don't have any gifts. I don't want to participate. But you do. And when you do, your efforts always return for the glory of God, whether you know it or not. The reason, really, I'm really not that good. I just don't mind being embarrassed. I don't mind kind of doing weird things. But you won't believe the kind of gifts you can share. I remember when I was in junior high, I learned this really quick. I was a junior high youth pastor, and we'd play basketball. I can remember playing basketball with the junior high boys, and I didn't even need to say anything, but I would just bump them like that underneath the basket, just bump them or knock them into the wall, and they loved it. And they would say, that pastor's so cool. And it has nothing to do with my ability to preach, teach, or whatever. What they liked about me is I was present and they knew I cared about them. And Todd, are you here? Todd Wildebohr, is he here? Okay, he was good. He wasn't in the first service either. But Todd Wildebohr is this big guy. Actually, he's super tall. Loves hockey. But Todd doesn't like to teach or preach or anything like that. But boy, he wanted to be in the senior high and just help. And he would always play games with them. He'd always sit with them. He would even lead Bible studies, and he thought he wasn't that good. I can remember one time we had snow camp, and Todd Wildebohr was freezing like this, and he's out on the ice, and he started a boot hockey game. And all these kids are trying to tackle Todd, and he's got like 10 kids, and he's throwing them in snow drifts. But if I asked any kid what they thought of Todd, they loved him. He didn't have, in his mind, I don't have much gifts. Yeah, he does. He's got a ton of gifts. So do you. And you can change lives. Paul shared his gifts even when he was looked down. He was looked down on for his lack of showmanship. I guess he was kind of old. Some people said he was frail. His voice wasn't as loud as the super apostles. The super apostles were probably like our, the big TV evangelists that kind of talk like that, and Paul probably talked kind of like that because it said he wasn't that impressive. In fact, he gave one sermon where a boy was so bored, he fell asleep and he fell out a window and died. Like, that's a bad sermon, Paul. Luckily, he could raise people from the dead, but that's not a good sermon. Like, that's bad. But he didn't care. He just kept talking. And because he kept talking, people listen. You got to look at it like this. Imagine this is a current that's going fast this way, and all these fish are going this way. And all of a sudden, a fish realizes, oh, if I keep going on this current, this goes down a giant waterfall and we're going to die. So this fish starts turning around and starts trying to get people to listen. Most of them won't listen, but every once in a while you'll get this one, and this one, and this one. And you'll look back and you got maybe 10. Yeah, but thousands are dying, but you got 10. Keep using your gifts. Jesus says in Matthew 5, 14 to 17, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. This little light of mine, you know that song, that's why we sing it. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand. Boom. And it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Galatians 6 even says, don't grow weary in doing good. Why not? Because at the proper time, you will reap a harvest. What he's saying, don't quit swimming this way. Don't quit telling people why. Because eventually you'll get to a place where, wow, I have a whole lot of fish following me. Sometimes it sticks. The third thing is that mature love perseveres even if the cost is high. But it's not easy to hang in there with people. Just isn't. And also, at what cost should I let people see my light? If it gets too costly, when do I quit? What if I'm hated? What if I'm falsely accused for sharing my faith? What if I'm not invited to the party anymore because I believe in Jesus? That's where the third point says, mature love perseveres. Keeps going. Look at verse 13. Verse 13 is really interesting. Paul says, I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I planned many times to come to you, which I told you, that was that 1,100-mile trip from Corinth to Rome. He planned many times, but he's been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you just as I had among the other Gentiles. So Paul's love for the Romans never stopped, even though time and time he got thwarted, but eventually he made it there. But look at the route he had to take to get there. This is the real route. So after he wrote the book of Corinthians, he went back to Jerusalem, which is down here on the right side. Then he started preaching up in Caesarea. He made the Jews so mad, they basically put him in prison. He demanded to go to Rome because he's always wanting to go to Rome. Do you know at the time when he was preaching in Caesarea, 40 Jews made a blood oath that they were going to kill Paul. So he had 40 people that wanted to kill him. That's not too good a thing. Like, that'd be kind of hard. The worst that ever happened to me in ministry is maybe a kid turfed my lawn, or do you guys remember that one time when a guy was mad at me and he came up here and yelled at me? That was kind of weird. I also did have a time where a student in our ministry was having a bad time with their dad, and I kind of gave him advice, and the dad didn't like the advice, so he was waiting for me in the old blue gym. Remember the old blue gym? I was up in the youth room, and he kind of said, I'm so mad at you. I want to kill you. I want to hit you. And I'm up there with him all alone. He's a pretty big guy. And I said, go ahead. I've been hit a lot. I played rugby. I don't care. 40 guys wanted to kill Paul. And then not only that, he had to travel to Myra and then Fair Havens. And then they got in a shipwreck on Malta. And then in Malta, that's when he was so cold, he's kind of warming his hand by the fire. And a snake bit on his hand. Remember, he shook it off. And then he goes to Syracuse, and they trip him all the way to Rome, where he's in house arrest, chained to a soldier all day long for 2 years. But he kept preaching. Why would he do this? Because of mature love. Fox's Book of Christian Martyrs writes, eventually, in the 14th year of Nero, quartodecimo Neronis anno is the date, on the same day with Peter, Paul was beheaded at Rome for Christ's sake and was buried in the Ostian Way, the 37th year after our Lord's Passion, and Paul's body was buried outside the walls of Rome. So he got his head chopped off for you and me. And all we have is this little book. Is that worth it? Oh yeah. Yeah. Changed my life. Literally changed my life, this book. Do you know how much money Paul could have made being a Roman lawyer or a Jewish leader? He was a Pharisee. But instead, he spent his life going from town to town telling people about Jesus at his risk. I'd say from a modern perspective, he made some terrible financial choices. Terrible. Why do you do this? Why do you do this? Because he believed it. I just want to go on my A slide for a second. My A slide is where I just tell you what I'm feeling right now. From our vantage point, we live in a world right now where trying to persuade people to believe in a set of ideas seems very unproductive and very, causes conflicts everywhere. People won't like you. So why try? So I have found after giving sermons myself, especially ones I thought I nailed it, there's always somebody who wants to throw cold water on you. Sometimes heaping insults. Sometimes even derogatory comments about the teaching, and even my character. It just happens. It happens. I have learned, however, over time, you cannot let people steal your joy. You can't. They want to, because they don't like that you got Christ. And it becomes obvious. For some reason, God has put in me a desire to persuade. I don't know why I like to fight for the faith and contend for the faith. And I have found there's people who will twist and even turn my words to say what I'm not saying, and people will do the same thing to you. Doesn't necessarily have to be preaching. It could be sharing a gift. It could be just people who mock your purity. People will mock your purity. People will mock it. Because this world is always looking to bring other people down. People want you to share in their misery. People like you to share in their misery. If they're miserable and you're not, they want you to be just as miserable. Don't let anyone steal your joy. Over the years, I've also wondered this. This is a little deeper into the A slide. Why do so many adults seem closed off to the world? Seems when you're a kid, the world it's fun. But the older you get, the more reserved you get because the more insults are given to you. And some people, when they get insulted, they close up and they quit. And they hide. And many people, even in the church, have what I call the hermit attitude. I've gotten hurt and I don't want to try anymore. I don't want to go anymore. Because we do live in a world where people throw cold water on your dreams, your accomplishments, your ideas, even your excitement for Jesus. That's just the way the world is. Even in junior high, you probably had somebody that came up with some weird nickname for you. You know what people called me? Because my last name is Weeks, W-E-E-K-S. They spelled it W-E-A-K-S. You're weak, Weeks. I could have quit. No. It's dangerous out there. They hate me out there. Who cares? Who cares? I call this the negative side of adulthood, where after a while, people have just quit sharing their dreams, their accomplishments, their ideas and excitement, and they've closed themselves off. And they figure, why share when it seems like no one cares? And when you say that, what you're saying, here's what you're saying. When I'm going up the stream, nobody's listening to me. Look at all those people. Look at all those people. I'm all alone. But look, some people are joining you. Don't let anybody steal your joy. Become an infragile saint. Infragility is different than fragility. Infragility means the more people throw at me, the stronger I get. When I weightlift, it actually is destroying my muscles, but when I rest, my muscle actually is rebuilding itself stronger than when I started lifting. I'm made to be infragile. Be a warrior for Jesus. The more people push back, the more you need to realize you are probably doing something right to make the wrong people so upset. Or look at it like this. What kind of person is Satan the most active against? The person who is effectively sharing Jesus, arguing his case about the Lord, or the hermit? The person who doesn't want to make anyone mad anymore? I've learned if Satan can get you to remain quiet, he gets the floor. Paul's joy in Christ kept him preaching, even though angry Jews did their all to stop him. So don't be surprised if you get pushback for sharing the gospel. I wrote this more to myself than anyone else. Remember, mature love perseveres. So in closing, the question is this. So really deep down, you got to ask this question. Why should I even care about others? Why should I? Why should I persevere? Why? Why should I care about others? Especially if it costs me so much. Because mature love was shown to me. Jesus traveled to be with us from heaven. Jesus traveled to be with me here on this earth from heaven. Heaven's a pretty cool place, like perfect. And he comes here to Kent City? Seriously? He had a lot of gifts and he shared all of them. Miracles, he'd heal the blind. I guess when they said he'd preach, people never heard anybody like him. I remember one time I was in preaching class and we were talking to our preaching teacher. We said, what do you think was the greatest sermon ever? Was it Martin Luther King Jr.? Was it Chuck Swindoll? And he goes, no. The greatest sermon ever. It was on the hillside right next to the Sea of Galilee. And a man said, blessed are the poor. In a way for theirs, like he said, that sermon was the greatest sermon. I would have loved to have been there. Thank God, Jesus shared his gifts. And the world killed him for it. They killed him for it. So if you wonder, should I love? Should I care about others? I just want to read this to end, 1 John 4, 7 through 11, and look at this picture while I read this verse. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we've loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another.